So, one of the reasons I moved to Mexico was I just didn't like the politics of the United States. I hadn't liked them for a very long time, basically almost since 1980. But I had to make a living, and I was not yet old enough to get my pension, Social Security pension. I already was able to get my Writer's Guild pension when I was 55, but that really wasn't enough to live on, even in Mexico. But in 2004, when they passed the Patriot Act, I went, oh no. If you don't know what the Patriot Act is, it happened after 9/11, and it was an act in which uh, the Homeland Security decided that anybody who was accused of or who might be involved in any kind of terrorist activity could simply be arrested, and they could not have a lawyer or anybody to defend them. And it wasn't likely that I was ever going to be arrested as a terrorist, but it was just so against what democracy is that. And then there was that horrible stuff going on in Guantanamo. I said, I can't be in a country that simply doesn't represent my values. It just didn't represent my values. So I went to Tijuana, to Playa de Tijuana. And I was able to buy a house. I'm rather impulsive at times. I've gotten better about not doing this anymore. And what I did was I found somebody, an owner of a house, who was willing to carry the mortgage. If I think it was 25% down. And I was able to borrow that money from the Writers Guild of America for a down payment. And I did that. I bought this house in Playa de Tijuana, about 2 blocks in the street. And at that time, Playa de Tijuana was kind of a little funky, but it was very sweet. And because it's close to the border, everybody spoke English. And I was only 6 miles from the border, and I was able to go back and forth because I was still running writers' retreats. I had a big house, a 4-bedroom house, wasn't that big. I was running writers' retreats and also cosmic consciousness retreats up in Fallbrook, California. Then about a year later, so I did that. I kept go back and forth, back and forth. My brother convinced me that I should move to Denver, Colorado, and my house in Fallbrook had become worth a lot of money. So I sold and I moved to Denver, Colorado. Before I did that, I made arrangements to rent out the house in Playa de Tijuana with a real estate agent there, and they would collect the money and they would pay the monthly payment to the owner of the house, the seller who had sold me the house, which they did. And I lived in Denver, and I opened a theater called Celebration Works, and we were pretty good for about 2 years, but then the building we were in was going to be renovated, and finding another building was pretty good. And I was kind of not loving Denver. Oh, it's beautiful in the mountains and everything. I'm not really I didn't like winters. And I was missing California, and I'd already actually come back to California in 2006 or 7 and to Tijuana, to that house to visit it. And I just decided in 2009 to return, to go to Mexico. But first I had to go back to California and establish myself there. Anyway, around 2007, I got a phone call from the agent, and they said, the real estate agent in Tijuana, the place de Tijuana, they said, have you heard from the seller? And I went, no, that's your job. You heard from the seller. And they said, well, his wife came to pick up the payment, and we didn't give it to her. And I thought, good idea. And he said, and the next day, another woman came who said she was his wife. And she brought a baby with her, and she wanted the payment. And I went, okay, I'm coming to Tijuana. And I went to Tijuana right away. I went to Tijuana, said, what's going on? And they said, well, something. Well, in fact, what was going on is that he had been kidnapped, and despite a ransom being paid, he had disappeared. He was presumed dead. Which is quite a sad story. The house was vacant, and at that time, I was unsure what I was going to do. So I said, well, let's rent the house. And they said, well, maybe you want to sell it because, the market has gotten better, and then you could pay off the balance that I owed him. And I said, oh, okay, to his family, to the heirs. And I knew who his sisters were. We had met once before. And I said, okay, fine. So we put the house up for sale, and they found a buyer, and they did something that never happens in the United States. They let the buyers move in. Now, the buyers had a mortgage, they had a bank approval, and that seemed not a horrible idea, and I was still in Denver. But I was coming back regularly to see about the house, coming out to stay with friends in California, or going down to renting a place in Rosarito at that time, a little bit south of Rosarito, in Playas del Mar, I think it was called. And what was going on with the house? Well, what went on eventually was they had to go through probate. So we had a whole year of going through probate. And the judge declared that, yes, indeed, they were the heirs to all of his property because, you see, all we had, besides my fiducie comiso and my papers that said I owned the house, all we had in terms of the debt was a public notice that he had filed. Okay, there was a debt that I owed him, and it was based on the balance I had owed him before we had paid down along the couple of years that I was gone. But the judge, for whatever his reason, said, no, they're not the legal heirs. We can't do that. So there was another year of waiting for another judge. And meanwhile, hello, the country started to drift into a real estate, a global real estate depression. It was like 2008 now, 2009. And the buyers lost their approval, their loan approval, but they were still living in the property. They were still living in the property. And they also stopped paying rent. Well, I was in the United States. There wasn't a whole lot I could do about it. Anyways, I did move back to California. And the sister and I were in conversation about this because I very much wanted to get rid of it. And she very much wanted to have it as part of her family. There was a big, big problem because he had never said on that piece of paper that this debt could be paid to him or any of his heirs. It could only be paid to a dead man. Mexican law is very, very literal. It's very literal. He wasn't around to collect. So the buyers were now the squatters living in the house. And I, spoke to a couple of different lawyers, and I paid this lawyer and they paid that lawyer, and I was about to file. And I just said, you know what? I'm willing to live with this. I'm willing to live with that. I'm going to lose this house because it was just so stressful. I would have to keep going to Mexican courts and doing things. And I just said, this is not what I signed up for. So just remember that. If you're from the United States, you're a citizen of the United States and you're not dual citizens with Mexico, and you buy a property, don't do what I do. Don't rent it out and don't leave the country. And I don't even know what happened. Playa de Tijuana has become so elegant and fancy now. I really suspect that the building has been torn down, and probably they've got some fancy condominium style thing there. But maybe they're still there. I don't know. It wasn't worth it to me to fight. I was by then, late 60s. Actually, wait a minute. How old was I? I was 68, 69. Anyway, when I was 71, I made the decision to move back to Mexico, period. The politics hadn't gotten any better in the United States. In fact, if anything, they'd kind of gotten worse. The man who started it, which was Ronald Reagan, who had fired all those comptrollers and really sort of dog whistled to everybody, hey, do what you want, folks, was gone. And there were, now Obama was president, and that was better. But I'm a woman. And I was a freelance writer all my life, and I'd worked in Hollywood for many, many years, which is how I could have, it was how I could afford to buy my first house in the United States. But the United States was getting more and more expensive, and I could afford it. I want to say this. I'm not one of these people who moved to Mexico because I couldn't afford to live in the United States. My house was practically paid for, and the truth of the matter is I paid almost the exact same amount of money for the first few years I was here as I was paying in the United States because I bought a house here. I have an addiction to buying houses when I can. Things have gotten changed now. And so I bought a house in an expatriate community because I had felt that Tijuana, Playa de Tijuana thing had gone out of my control, that I really didn't understand what had happened, but I knew that I had been very foolish in not doing my due diligence. And so I lived in a Punta Banda, which is south of Ensenada, and it's all gringos, let's face it. It's all gringos. And those houses, most of them are on rented land, leased land, which in the United States was no, never. But you know what? It worked out fine. I bought a house on leased land, and I had it for 9 years, and I was able to travel back and forth and go different places in the meanwhile. I really felt while I was there, well, my Playa de Tijuana experience was much more Mexico. My neighbors were Mexican. It forced and helped me to learn more Spanish. My español no es más o menos. Tengo español, pero yo no tengo confidence. And my accents are audible. So a lot of times I know the word and I'm saying the word and they don't understand what it is because I haven't said, for instance, eggs. They're not jueves. They're not H. They're not H. They're huevos. They're W's. Not husos. They're jueves. That was a great thing. I really loved when I learned to use over and there's a lot of, you don't say H's, you don't say J's. There's a few things you don't say in Spanish. I'm still learning, and I'm asking my Spanish-speaking friends, please, please, please speak Spanish to me. I know it's horrible for you. This gives you just 10 minutes. And I made friends outside of the gringo community. I just didn't love it. I didn't love that the menus were in English. Everything, you paid in dollars instead of pesos. I said, why? I feel like I'm living in a suburb in the United States. I wanted to live in Mexico, and I wanted the challenges of it. Well, I wanted the joys of it. The challenge being the language, but the joys are the people. I couldn't meet the people if I was always hanging out with gringos. So I did move out of that community. I moved to Ensenada, and I rented a house or an apartment in Ensenada, and that was a big change for me because then I had to continuously deal in Spanish. I also at that time was diagnosed with a arteriosclerosis, which is hardening of the arteries. And my cholesterol was very, very high, and up until then I've been like, oh no, I'm a vegetarian. I don't eat meat, blah blah blah. But I ate an avocado a day, and I poured olive oil on everything because they always say, that's a good oil, olive oil. Yeah, it's a good oil, but a glass of it isn't a good. Like a teaspoon of it once in a while. And so I I had a cardiologist. I didn't really love him. He said, oh, you have to go get stents. And I said, no, I don't have Medicare. And besides, it was COVID had come. And I said, isn't there anybody down here who could do stents? He said, yes, but it's very expensive. It's $7,000 a stent, by the way. And I said, well, is anybody going to do it? He said, yes, I can do it. I said, well, what? He said, well, and then he said to me the most interesting thing that gave me hope. He said, you have a better chance of dying of COVID if you go to the hospital than of dying of a heart attack. And I went, oh, well, that's the good news. I also went on statins and to lower my thing, and also some blood pressure medicine. And the statins didn't work, and I was really being pretty good. Although I must say that statins at one point, they say, oh, well, I could eat cheese because now I take statins and they lower your cholesterol. You can't do that. I can't do that. So I actually found a doctor who's rather well known. I'm not going to tell you who he is unless you ask. And I went to him and he said, oh, we got to get this down. And he put me on double the dose of statins. And guess what? And I was really, really careful. From then on, I looked at everything. How much fat was in it? Forget about olive oil. Forget about oil altogether. I spray it. I have a spray thing. It's like 1 second. I stopped eating eggs completely. I use egg whites. And I just changed my diet. And oh, by the way, I'm half Italian. You know how hard it was for me to stop eating cheese? And I met more Mexicans. I met my friend Sarayi, who is a wedding planner here in Ensenada, who is just a wonderful human being. And she also happens, if she sees a dog on the street that needs to be rescued, God help us, she's rescued that dog. No matter the condition, she's rescued that dog. And I've helped her with that. We've rescued a couple of dogs together and had them spayed and found homes for them. And I really love that. I mean, there's something wonderful about finding an animal that needs help and helping it. And I continue to rent. I had a little problem. I was a little naive. One of the things you do have to look out for in any country when you're older is loneliness. I'm a single woman, older. I'm actually going to be 85 in September, if I'm lucky. And I let myself get taken advantage of, quite honestly. I was invited to move in with a sculptor and her boyfriend, who was a chef. And we had this idea, we would rent a big house together and we would open a gallery. an art gallery, and that really appealed to me. And I'd run a theater, and I always knew artists and creative people, and that never happened. 6 months in, there was a lot of pot smoking and a lot of beer drinking going on, and I went, you know what? I don't think we're ever going to get anything done here, and I was right. And so I asked them to move out, and of course they did. But then I was stuck in this vast, vast house, paying a large amount of rent, and I had to find a place, and I did find another place, but they were the evil, the evil Paseo Todos Santos people, who everybody knows. They basically hold you hostage when you try and move out and tell you that you owe them money that you don't owe them. And I had proof that I didn't owe them, but that didn't matter because when the time came for me to move out, they called the police. And you know, the police are not there to litigate. And their manager said I owed them money. And I said, wait, I have writing here that says I don't owe you any money. And the manager said, that's fake. So I ran for my life. I got whatever else I could get out, and I ran for my life. And my Mexican friends helped me. And Hel was there. Judith was there. Oh my God, they were just wonderful. Jacob and some other people, and they were wonderfully supportive, and they helped me. And what I had done in a moment of rational thinking about housing was my neighbor was selling a manufactured home. And if she didn't sell it, it was going to get left there for these vipers. And so she sold it to me at a very good price. I'm in it now. And actually, we have some videos of it. And I think that Angel is going to show the befores and afters. I'm not sure. And it was an enormous undertaking. Again, my Spanish isn't wonderful, and also legally. Sarai was magnificent. I always recommend, and we'll find a way to publish her. If you're looking for somebody to give you an event, she does quinceañeras. I know I didn't pronounce that right, I'm sorry. And weddings, bodas, and pretty much anything you ask her to do that involves a celebration, and that's legal. And that's legal. And she also handled all the paperwork for me at the notary, which made this completely legal since I own it outright, and I own the lot that I bought. But that meant I had to pay to get a sewer connection. I had to pay to have the electrical put in. That was just nothing, took a second and a half. And also I had to pay for water to come to the house. And it actually took 2 months. It actually took 3 months from the time we put it on the lot. And by the way, here's what's wonderful about the way things are done in Mexico. The seller of the lot, I said, I need this to be on the lot by July 3rd because I'm moving out, and then it has to be out of here by that time because my neighbor was moving out. And they weren't exactly going to let me pull a trailer out there. And he said, well, you can just move it on my lot. Now, in the United States, that'd be impossible, legally impossible, because it would be in everybody's mind, well, if the deal doesn't close, they're going to own your manufactured home. You have no rights to it, blah, 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 blah. And I kept saying, to the agent, I think I really need like a rental agreement for him, an interim rental agreement. He said, we're working on it. We're working on it. I have learned to trust in Mexico. Yeah, I had a bad experience back. It wasn't even a bad experience, and it wasn't as bad as the seller who was murdered. Okay, I had a stupid experience because I didn't watch out. I didn't have a lawyer, and I didn't have anybody representing me. I just was, hello, I'm from America, and I have some money. Not a lot. And here I am. The other things are I'm considered not to have cardioarteriosclerosis any longer. My cholesterol is at 145, 150, but your LDLs, I want to tell you something, all you people out there. We all look at our cholesterol, and in Mexico, they want you to have it under 200. But the most important part about your health is LDL. Those are the things you want to look for when those cholesterol results come in, because that's the thing, if you're going to have cholesterol, that's the thing that lines the arteries. So you want that to be very low, and I want mine to be very, very low because that's the way it goes. I see my cardiologist twice a year. I forgot to see him last year, which he wasn't that happy about it. And here's the other thing about my cardiologist. When I go to a lab and have my tests done and the lab sends the results to him, he calls me the same day that he receives them, that night, and tells me whether I have an appointment or not. Tells me. Usually, he didn't tell me, you have nothing to worry about. Again, considering my age. Considering my age, the risk is always that I'm going to die any minute. So far, so good. So I've had a lot of many more wonderful experiences than negative experiences here. I also am so grateful, particularly at this time in the history of the United States. I don't even cross the United States to go shopping. I know that there are people down here, gringos, that do that. No way you'll get me to cross the border to go shopping. Because I suppose it's paranoid, but who knows? It's just because you're paranoid doesn't mean somebody isn't following you. That one day they may close the border in the United States and not let citizens leave. And they're set up for it. They've got the booths 100 feet in front of the Mexican border. They've been set up for it for a couple of years now to stop us from coming in if they should ever have that desire. And I love, the other day I was going to go out to the Valle de Guadalupe. I love to go out there. There's several places I love to eat. The Adobe Truck is a lovely place to eat. There are places right here in town at, what is it called? Plaza Santo Tomas, not to be confused with Paseo. Don't rent there. Plaza Santo Tomas is right in the middle of town. I think it's at 6th and Riverall. And they have a bunch of restaurants there, and they have a Robles, and they have a wonderful fish market. And there's just, they have a wonderful bakery, Ogaza. And so I really feel I lucked out, because if you stay in the United States and you're as old as I am, they have already marked you. You know, the system, I don't have Medicare. The system has marked you as you're old and potentially could have all kinds of problems, mental problems, you know, all kinds of terrible diseases could happen to us. And the one thing that I knew before I made on 2010 to 11, when I went, I'm out of here now, I'm out, was I was talking to the guy at that time. I had Medicare, and I said, well, what about long-term care? If something should ever happen to me because I'm single and I have no children. And he said, well, you know, he said, no, you shouldn't bother with long-term care because we don't know if it's going to be around. And so that's one of the lies of the United States. And the lie is that there's a safety net for you. There is no safety net for you in the United States. They don't have that lie here. They don't have that lie here. They do have pensions, and the pensions are getting better, but there's not the lie of, don't worry, the government will take care of you in your old age. No, they won't. And the family is what makes Mexico so strong, and which makes Mexico so friendly and so easy to live. Well, the parts of Mexico I've been in, I've been to Mexico City, a lot of smog. I've been to Oaxaca, and I'm actually going to go back because I had a bad trip last time because it was very, very hot, and I'm heat sensitive. It was like in the 90s. It was the end of October. It was the middle of November. It was late November because it coincided with Thanksgiving week in the United States. It was late November. It was in the 90s, and I thought, I'm going to die here. They're going to bury me here in Oaxaca. But I love the art. They had so many galleries. I, of course, love the food. I didn't get to meet so many of the people. And this time I'm going to get a chance to do that because I'm not staying near a tourist area. And I'm going to do more walking around to be just around people. That's the other thing. There's a certain amount of curiosity. I'm an older woman who apparently looks American. And people sometimes talk to me, often talk to me. And I do love that. I can go out to someplace and I know I'm going to have a conversation every time I go out the door. You're never lonely here. That's what I feel. I'm never really lonely here. Am I alone? Yes. But am I lonely? No. And I have been living here on the street where I am for 7 months now. I know practically every neighbor. I certainly know the neighbors who are open and congenial with other neighbors. There are certain neighbors that don't want to be bothered. They just live their lives. That's it. Don't bother us. They're just like Americans. Americans don't want to be bothered. But they are in the minority. And even those people still we say buenos dias. And that's the other thing. Mexicans look at you. When, Americans don't. We avert our eyes. We, why? We're afraid somebody's going to be like Bobby De Niro in that movie. What you looking at? You looking at me? What are you looking at something? Right? That doesn't happen in Mexico. I walked my dog this morning at 7:30. There was a guy coming down the other end of the street. My dog was loose. And as we're passing, he said, buenos dias, buenos dias. He saw me. I saw him. That's very, very important also for safety, because then we know someone who doesn't belong in our community. They may be perfectly mild and fine just walking through, but we know that there's a stranger there. Also, the guy with the vegetable truck comes around. The other day I saw an ice cream person come around. I'd be like, oh, excited. Like I was like 8 years old. Oh, I want some ice cream, but I didn't do it. It's much more personal. Life in Mexico is more personal, unless you live in an expat community, in which case it's exactly like living in a suburb of the United States, except with more alcohol. I don't drink that much. Now, I'm giving a party on July 5th, and I think we'll probably include some footage from that for my neighbors who've been so kind to me and helping. When I moved, I had nothing. I was up on stilts. I had no front gate. It was a great adventure. And I would encourage anybody who is looking into Mexico to don't believe the demonization. It is a growing country. It has a huge pharmaceutical. It's got its own sort of Silicon Valley. It's got its own tech things. Further onto Central, it's a growing country. And by the way, you have huge natural resources here. Huge. This country is never going to be poor, or not in a couple of generations anyway. Way longer than that actually, because of they don't really exploit themselves. They don't exploit that way. Also, the food is much better here. A lot of the food is natural. I can buy cheese that's been made locally by some woman in her kitchen, and it's perfect. I can buy local breads that haven't been made. I will not buy Bimbo breads. Bimbo's is the same as I don't know what, Weber's in the United States or something. But really good breads. Ogaza has good breads. There's another place called Alive, and there's a place called Kafkin. It's a little pricey, Kafkin, but their bread is superior. It really is superior. And the quality of food here is higher too, because they don't have the great industrial agriculture that we have in the United States. And I want to just say this. I have actually never had food sickness, and I've eaten food off the street, off the stands, never. And that's another thing. Because I live in Ensenada, by the way, we get wonderful fish all the time. So I feel very, very fortunate that I've been accepted here. I mean, I will say that I have two close friends. A friend of mine, she's Mexican who lives in the United States, and she has a place down here. She doesn't come often, but we've been friends for 13 years. She helped me out. I went to a beauty parlor once when I didn't know anything. It was like when I first got here, didn't know how to ask, how do you tint hair? And she said, oh, I speak English, I'll help you. And we became friends, so we're still friends. Although I don't see a lot of her because she lives in the United States. But I do, Sarai is a very close friend, and I do see and hear from her. And I'm getting to know my neighbors. We chat, and they're helping me with my Spanish. And I'm very lucky to be 84, going on 85. This June, July, August, 3 months, 2.5 months, living in a safe place where people know each other and they see you. I don't ever have to worry about not being seen, or if they don't see me for a day or two, that somebody isn't going to call or say, hey, Carol. And I have a dog, and she's crazy. And I walk 3 times a day with her, and that helps me meet more people. I met somebody around the corner who's got 5 dogs. And I feed the dogs when I'm out, even the ones that are already fed. And the reason I do that, I also have to carry a stick because a lot of dogs are loose. And I've never, ever had a problem, by the way, with a stray dog. Never, ever, ever had a stray dog try to attack my dog or attack me. I have had a problem with domestic dogs that got loose from their yard. So for that reason, I carry a stick. And I also carry a little bit of kibble with me, just so they won't bark that much. Every day's an adventure in Mexico. That's how I look at it. Every day's an adventure, and may you also learn and enjoy the adventure of Mexico.